So thanks us and thanks RC. So welcome to the first discussion of the debrief. Just to introduce a little bit the concept, debrief is a conversation between people from different industries, sports and education and technology mostly, in order to critically think about what's happening, what has just happened, the COVID crisis, but mostly to turn the page and to look forward to new solutions and to the rebuilding. So I quickly introduce myself. My name is Matteo Tassi. I'm Italian and I work as Executive Education Manager at the International Center of Sports Studies here in Neuchâtel in Switzerland, which means that I work across sport and education. And then we have Hosni Buford from San Antonio and is CEO of San Antonio Spurs. So he's pure sport and he has been in this industry for a long time. And we have Hosni Zaouali, CEO of Tech AdaptiKa, who's in education and technology. So we have all the different souls of this conversation represented here. We have sport, we have education, we have technology. The idea is just to sit together, discuss a little bit, ask questions, and see from here where we can move to. So I think the floor is open. We can just start discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Matteo. I feel like, yes, there is definitely a need right now just to do a little bit of a debrief between what's happening in the world regarding the COVID in the sports industry, but also in the education industry, and maybe perhaps try to see what sports can learn from education and what can education learn from sports. And thank you so much, RC Buford, for being with us. It's obviously a super pleasure, and would love to pick your brain on, first of all, how did it go? After a few months in complete lockdown, the NBA had to stop. How did you live this entire, this entire crisis?
Well, it's really interesting to see how players and coaches continue to communicate pretty effectively. I think our coaching staff and our performance team did a good job of reacting quickly and getting the equipment that we could, that was necessary for people to maintain at least basic levels of fitness and performance. And then the use of virtual technologies really helped keep the team connected, keep the team together. Probably our biggest challenge was, our coach is not a tech guy. He's got a cell phone. He doesn't have a computer or a tablet. And we had to use his granddaughter to get her tablet to him to get him on a Zoom call. So
Popovic's granddaughter, really?
Whenever we needed to get a hold of Pop, we just called his granddaughter, and she lived in the same apartment building, and she took him her iPad upstairs, and we could get Pop on a Zoom call.
Well, that's an amazing story right there.
We did some great virtual workouts, some great virtual learning. It was a really good time to understand how technology is going to help us educate and connect our team in times when we are back together as well. And I think the more we can learn from education and the gamification of learning, the better we're going to be able to, develop players throughout their whole learning experience. It doesn't just have to happen in a gym. And I think that's what we learned in the 3 months that we were apart.
Yeah. So if I may, so you see how COVID-19 has caused the all NBA players to suspend their games, right, until further notice. What have you tried in terms of trying to establish communication between the players, the franchise, the fans? You talked a little bit about, hey, we tried a couple of technology tools, here and there. And what have you found interesting in there?
I think what we really also found is the way that we can connect with our players and with our fans through our digital and social engagements. And we really did a nice job of our players staying connected to our fans through their social channels and through our social channels. Patty Mills held a small business fundraiser for all the coffee shops and the small business coffee shops around the community, and held a one-day of service for all the communities. The San Antonio Food Bank has been one of the biggest producers of in fighting food insecurity. And so they've been feeding 120,000 meals a week. And it's been a great way for us to use our players and our social and our digital channels to amplify messaging for the partners that we have, and engage them in new ways and learn together when we couldn't be together. I think when our fans haven't been able to come to us, we've had to get, I think, more dynamic in the ways that we come to our fans.
That's so interesting.
We'll learn from that as we go into the future. I think it'll help us develop more meaningful and powerful relationships. And I think it'll also challenge us to figure out how we better use virtual activities and virtual education and gamification of programming to create learning environments, but also to create environments for social impact.
That's so interesting, because that was the question related to this. Is there a way to reimagine the role of the players and their community with the fan interactions, the community during this downtime? And you guys have stepped up your game in terms of, hey, fans, you cannot come to us. Well, let's just bounce on that, just adapt, pivot, and we go to you. So whether it's the food bank or using VR to facilitate circular interactions, you guys tried so many things. And do you think some of these things are going to stick in the long term, or do you think it's just a phase?
I don't think that anything that we have now is just a phase. I think we're going to have to react to an entirely new set of a new normal, and going back to the way we did things before, I just don't think the world's expectations have changed. The way we've communicated has changed. I think not only ourselves, but education, the work environment, nothing will ever be the same again.
Well,
it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I have a question on that, because I'm a social anthropologist, so I studied quite a lot the relation between fans and the team to form a community. So what are the key areas where this interaction can be really pushed in order to reinforce this community between the team, the fans, and all the stakeholders around that?
I think I was talking to Jimmy Pitaro, who's the president of ESPN, and I think he said it simplest to me, which is the real important ways to connect with our communities is going to be through access and authenticity. And so I think the more we can create environments that create, access to our fans, to our players, and then have it really be authentic communication, and get real depth of the conversation, and allow them to learn from each other and learn together. I think we have an example of that when the George Floyd crisis became really evident and prevalent in the discussions around our organization and around communities across the country and around the world. We established a series we called Spurs Voices, and we opened up the opportunity for people that work for us, players, staff, and our community, to share their stories about how systematic racism has impacted their lives. And I think it was very emotional, it was very raw, and I think the response to it has created an entirely different level of communication and conversation, and a depth to the issues around social justice and systematic racism that we had never had before.
No.
And it was humiliating a bit to be a leader in an organization and have it take a crisis like that to really challenge us to have deep conversations. I think technology might have aided in the depth of the conversations, because if you'd had 400 people in the same room, I would imagine that people would have been more reluctant to be as authentic and as emotionally raw as they were. However, because of the virtual environment, I think we got incredibly good depth and real vulnerability that might not have happened if we were in person. And I think that's one thing I've learned about this advantages of technology. Just because you can't be together doesn't mean that you can't have real deep conversations.
When you first sent it to me, RC, I was, I couldn't stop watching. It was so authentic. And what I really loved is that this change in terms of this approach where all of a sudden it's not just Popovich saying something and the fan absorbing, or a player saying something or throwing something on social media and the fan absorbing. Now the fans, community workers, people, they're all on the same playing field and they're all talking with the same voice, with the same tool, which I thought was quite amazing. And whether it's George Floyd or it's COVID, I have the feeling that something has changed in that matter. Before this COVID crisis, it was more about, hey, the franchise or the club for soccer, for instance, Matteo, you work a lot with the FIFA. We say something and the fan just do whatever you want with it. Eventually, you keep coming to the stadium and it's going to be fun. But right now, I have the feeling that there's some kind of much more interactions back and forth between the fans, the franchise, the club, the merchandiser, and so on and so forth. Would you agree, Matteo or RC?
Well, I totally agree, and I think you are really spot on. And on that, I have maybe an additional question or an additional point that I would like to explore. You mentioned all the stakeholders that are around a team, and including merchandising, and I would like to focus on sponsors because, of course, sponsors are a key part of the industry because they inject money in the industry and they expect a return on investment. And we know that traditionally, sponsor activation of course, within the venue where we have an event. So how is the relation with sponsors, and in particular in regards to sports, sponsors activation, in what has changed and what are the opportunity that we can take in the post-COVID world?
I think the alignment of values is really creating powerful opportunities. I think it's also having an impact for sponsors to express their values in a way. I think you're seeing now sponsors pulling monies from companies who are not representing their values, their goals around social justice and racism reform. Or racism, anti-racism. And I think that is going to create real, again, I think vulnerable and emotional conversations. And also it's an opportunity for teams, for clubs, for sponsors, for organizations to storytell together and to amplify their impact in areas in ways that impact the community. We're gathering a group of leaders of our biggest partners across our region in the next 10 days. And we're going to have a town hall session amongst the leadership there to create understanding of what we each feel we can do to face these social justice issues. And then how can we work together to build actionable programming for change. And I think you're going to see more than just I'm putting my sign and my dollars on your Jumbotron or on your billboards. And I think you're going to see people working together in your partnerships to create opportunities for real change.
Sorry, I was saying that it's so interesting because I'm not a sponsor at all, but I can imagine that soon, hopefully, when we see superstar players, whether it's in soccer, football, or basketball, whenever these guys are going to get involved in the community, do you think that there will be some kind of opportunity there for the sponsors to put their logo on that, to put their shirt, their jersey on that? Because, you know, when you see like a superstar player going to the food bank and start distributing food, it's a good image for Nike as well. It's a good image for Adidas as well. It's a good image for Kappa as well. Although it's not into sports, but it's really related to their values. Because right now, all the players who do that, they do that on their own time and on their own money. And I have the feeling that this is where the world is going. Slowly but surely, we're taking sports outside of the stadium, outside of the court, outside of the arena.
You know, LeBron James, just within basketball, has had a huge impact in that way. And I think Nike, you've seen Nike support LeBron's efforts, but now the group of athletes and celebrities that LeBron's bringing together to emphasize the vote and bringing out the real issues of amplifying the voice that people have through their vote, I think is going to be really important. And you'll see the leaders in those communities use their platforms to really to aggregate sponsors, partners, and the issues that are important in their lives.
Whether it comes to whether it's about George Floyd or COVID, I've seen huge amount of efforts done by the San Antonio Spurs, and honestly, some of the things that you've done are an example for a lot of us in different industries. A little bit less from the FIFA. We understand that this is more traditional organization that is not as flexible as the NBA, and then the educational field. So the education field that is supposed to prepare us for the future, that is full of change, by the way, because of artificial intelligence and all the changes that are happening, we need to prepare our kids to evolve and change at a faster pace. That system itself is not able to adapt. And we've seen, unfortunately, too many schools, too many universities still being reluctant to change and still trying to hold on that old system where I'm going to ask students to come to the amphitheater. And it's actually quite scary when you think about it, because healthy students in universities, and I know that you guys are drafting, whether it's for soccer or for basketball, you guys are drafting a lot, they're going to be okay. What worries me is like 59-year-old Mrs. Robinson, who's teaching grade 12, who's, by week 5 in September, she will get sick, and by week 8, something worse can even happen. That really worries me a little bit. So the universities are now flirting with the idea of reopening universities or campus in September. I have the feeling that it's not really sustainable, and they have a hard time going online and putting something sustainable there beside, hey, let's go on Zoom, put everything you do in the class on Zoom, and let's see how everything goes. What do you think about that? Both of you, what do you guys think about this reluctance to change, especially that system is supposed to prepare us for the future full of change? So it kind of worries me a little bit about the future of the next generation.
Well, absolutely, Hosni. I think that, you mentioned I'm in Europe, and I know that the American sports world is more dynamic, whereas the European landscape is more traditional and conservative, if I can put it that way. And the risk that you just highlighted in regards to the education, I can see is actually the same here in Europe when it comes to sport. I can see that there is not really good planning behind that. It's just, sometimes it's just reopening just for the sake of reopening, just to keep the business all going, which is for me pointless, because at the end of the day, the show which is put on is not as good as the old one. So the comparison is always there, and the risks are there. You just mentioned that. We don't know what's going to happen. And I believe this is one of the main issues for the sports world, this reluctance to change and to envisage new new solutions. Of course, this is probably mostly a problem where you work for a governing body. I mean, we have the IOC, we have FIFA, we have other international federations. Of course, they stick to the old world, to their business model, which is a mega event every 2 or 4 years. But now the landscape has significantly changed. And the question is how we can reimagine the core business of sports, which is the event and ultimately the mega event like the World Cup, FIFA World Cup, or the Olympics.
But you, as an anthropologist, you know better than anyone that it's all about human interactions. And it's true that if you take that away from us, we are really threatening our core as a society. We can't interact with each other. And it's hard. It has been really hard. This whole mask thing, this whole you can't shake hands, you know, you can't hug people. That's really hard. But at the end of the day, I have the feeling that, you know, like Churchill has said before, never waste a good crisis. If we develop sustainable, relevant online education that makes humans' interactions better, well, we have a shot at revolutionizing this world. Because guess what? There's millions of kids out there, whether it's in Africa, South America, low-income neighborhoods in North America and Europe, that will benefit from that super relevant online program, cheaper and way faster than anything else. So never waste a good crisis. That's what I think about. But unfortunately, the educational system has been so conservative in their way to adapt, and I understand why, that it's taking longer than expected. But I have the feeling that, as Scott Galloway was saying on the news with Anderson Cooper the other day, some universities have started a death march, because if 30% of their students are not going to show up on campus, right there, they're just going to go below zero in terms of revenue, and that's going to be the end of it. Hopefully, we're not going to come to that to sports, but there's definitely some kind of shift that needs to happen, and people need to do it fast. That's why, you know, when I saw what the Spurs have done, I was like, hey, we need to get RC Buford on a call, because this is quite amazing.
Plus, the other thing I think that you brought up with the economic inequality is the digital divide. And if we're going to make really relevant change to the educational programming, we're going to have to create access to lower income communities to Wi-Fi, to technology in ways that will allow them to grow and to get educated. And it's not just in America, like you said. The more we can combat the digital divide, the more we can spread the impact of education around the world.
Actually, this is a huge opportunity to become more inclusive in both industries, like the educational one and the sports one, which is probably the opportunity we don't have to miss.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a little bit of effort from the educational world, from the governments to try to invest in that. But at the end of the day, you know, we're talking about 2.2 billion people in Africa by 2030, and 41% of them are under the age of 15. Imagine the impact on sports, imagine the impact on education, or even worse, imagine the impact if we don't do anything.
Yeah.
I've seen that in Africa everywhere. You take sports away and you take education away, and all that's left is violence. It doesn't really matter. Hutus, Tutsis, white, black, Muslims, Christians, we will fight. So we have a moral responsibility to start rethinking this and maybe using this as an opportunity. It's a very, very interesting time that we're living, and this little debrief here obviously will take, you know, the small pockets of what we talked about. But you as an anthropologist, Matteo, where do you see this is going? You know, when the question that I asked to RC earlier, is it going to stick? RC is more into saying like, yes, a lot of it's going to stick. What do you think is going to stick? What do you think is going to go away? Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. Of course, we know that cultures, by definition, they move and they evolve, and they are not the same. Even though some cultural facts, some cultural beliefs stay, which is a little bit the challenge. So I believe this situation is going to stick if. And I stress the if, as you said, there is a shared willingness to work together. And there is, and RC mentioned that there is a crucial need for alignment between all the stakeholders from the top to the bottom. This is key. Now, of course, cultures, as I said, they never stay the same, and they're always difficult to grasp. Anthropology was born as a study of people who were living far away from Europe, but thank God things have changed. And now we know that cultural systems are more complicated than that. I believe crisis, and we know that history told us about that, crises are always a good time for cultures to rethink about themselves. I can also add, without being too boring, the notion of total social fact, which is a key notion in sociology and anthropology. That means that a sports event is a key moment during which a society or a culture thinks about itself. This is really critical thinking, which is something that we have seen throughout all the history of the 20th century and even these recent years. So I believe this is a key moment. It is a total social fact because everybody is living that, everybody is involved, and this is a key time for cultures and societies to rethink about their identities, who we are, what's our mission, what we want to achieve, and what are our core values.
Yeah, super interesting. Listen, I'm going to leave you on a positive note, hopefully, because I've said a lot of bad things about education, and I was trying to see what's been done on the sports industry. But thanks to that archaic education system, we've done a lot of progress in the world. Today is the only time in history of humanity where people die more out of accidents than war. People die more out of obesity than famine. Or people die more out of old age than disease. So when you think about it, there's a lot that's been done, but it's true that as we are becoming more and more on this planet, 2050, we're going to be 10 billion. You can't keep building schools and stadiums and arenas as we used to. We're going to have to democratize that aspect. TV helped, obviously, but this human interaction has to take different forms, and technology can definitely help us with that. We're just going to need to fail a little bit more in order to succeed.
Maybe I have a last question for Arsi on that. Arsi, how do you see the next generation of stadiums or arenas? Because, of course, now we are using the old ones that were conceived for old needs. Now we know the world is changing. How do you see that?
I don't know that we know that yet. I think we continue to have to be adaptable. And just like Hosni said, we may get back into an on-campus environment in September, and then that may need to change quickly. I mean, just think over the last 3 months, how many things have changed on a daily basis about how we operate, what was open and now is back closed, how long different places waited to open, and then the impact that had on the spikes in the disease. I think we're a long way away from knowing what that new fan experience, the new community engagement will look like. And I think we also have to understand that it's going to take time for people to feel comfortable coming together. So I think we've got to figure out how we're going to communicate and gather as groups first before we figure out what the environment will be like in the coming future. I know we've been talking to architects about design projects, and architects are learning as fast as any different group. And most of the time, it's like Hosni's saying, is failing first and then learning. But I think the way we build the communities of the future are going to be just as interesting as the way we build the stadiums or the gathering places. How will cities be different? Will the time where there's hundreds of millions of people living in closed environments, will that continue, or will it be displaced more into rural communities. I don't know that we know that yet. I wish I had, if I had to figure it out, we'd be further ahead on how we're going to bring our team and our fans back together.
Yeah, how's it going, by the way? I heard that you guys are going to Disney World, right? You guys are renting Disney World, and
we're in the gyms now practicing. 22 of the 30 teams are going to go to Orlando around July 10th and have 3 weeks of training. And then the season will restart July 30th with 8 remaining regular season games. And from then, we'll move forward into the playoffs. So there's still a lot. Adaptability is going to be the key throughout this whole process.
Hey, listen, yeah, good luck because wow, it's amazing. Well, thank you all. I think, you know, we exhausted everybody's time. Thank you so much, Matteo. Thank you, RC. We'll put this video together at some point, take the best parts, and we'll try to make like a short, good debrief video. And hopefully maybe we can do that in 6 months or, yeah. So we're doing this with the African Development Bank next. We're doing this with different other institutions to try to see how other industries have adapted in this COVID-19 / George Floyd, because George Floyd is actually as impactful as COVID-19, to be honest. It's just a realization that there's, yeah, congratulations everyone for your great work, and thank you so much.
Hey, Hos, one question.
Yeah.
When we couldn't hear you on mute, I went like this. I don't know if that cut that out, will you? I'm sure that's not the signal that I want to.
Just kill this guy. No, we'll cut it off.
Pull that one out, please.
All right.
All right, guys. Have a good day, all right? Thank you all.